if you want one team that has steadily risen to the very top of women's football in Africa, then it's the Copper Queens of Zambia. They won their first ever game at the Women's AFCON in 2018, but since then, they've qualified to the Olympics in 2020, qualified to the Women's World Cup in 2023, and still on the ascendancy. Now, Zambia rubbed shoulders with some of the top women's teams on the continent. So here's a detailed profile about the team as they are heading to the 2024 Women's Africa Cup of Nations. I don't know what I'm doing. All right, so welcome back, and let's start first with a little bit of history or know-how about the Zambia team. So the nickname is the Copper Queens, as I've mentioned already. Copper, because Zambia is a country that is rich in minerals, and also queens because they are women and it's women's football and they are queens playing. So the name is the Copper Queens, and they have one of the most iconic entries to any game. You can start monitoring if you hear me now. They always enter the game by doing this and then rubbing their hands just to show favor. I think they say it's favor on their head. So they just enter a game like this. So that's the iconic entry they always have to enter every game with. But let's go into the Zambia team itself. Since we started playing Women's AFCON in 1998, Zambia qualified to their first ever edition in 2014. Yeah, so just recently, about 11 years ago, that was when they made their first appearance, even though the competition started about 27 years ago. It was only 11 years ago they made their first appearance, and it was Susan Banda who scored their first ever goal for them in the first edition, which they didn't even win any game in the very first edition. The next edition in 2016, Zambia did not even qualify to the 2016 edition, and they had to take the 2018 edition for them to win their first ever match at the Women's AFCON, which was a 5-0 victory against Equatorial Guinea. So in the very last edition of the Women's AFCON, Zambia finished in third place. They won bronze medal, beating Nigeria in the third place match. So this is a team who 11 years ago struggled to qualify, and suddenly they've risen to become one of the best and top on the continent. The rise of women's football in Zambia can be attributed to a lot of factors. And I think one we should mention should be the former head coach, Bruce Umwape, who literally built the team from scratch. He came to take over in 2018 and then built the team from scratch, got a lot of players to work together for the team to reach the level they got. And I think one player we should really have to mention is Barbara Banda, who is the captain of the team, has played an incredible and crucial part in Zambia reaching the height they are now. So it leads us to now in 2025, where Zambia has qualified to the Women's AFCON and they'll be participating in the tournament. But then they qualified by beating, that is Angola. They played just one game in the qualifiers and they beat Angola by 12 goals to 0 over 2 games. So the first game was 6-0, the second game was 6-0. Over the 2 legs, it was 12-0. And that's how they qualified to the Women's AFCON. So 24 names, 24 squad players has been named by Team Zambia for the Women's Africa Cup of Nations. But before I even delve into the team itself and then tell you about some of the players to look out for, let's first talk about notable omissions who didn't make the cut for Zambia in this year's AFCON. So in the last edition of the Women's AFCON, when Zambia won the bronze medal, the team they presented, that was 21 players they presented for that edition. Only 11 of them made into this one's. So quite a huge number of them didn't make it into this year's edition. And the first to note of is Evel Chitundu. So Evel Chitundu scored 2 goals at the Women's AFCON the last time. And also she was the player to score the goal which qualified Zambia to their first ever Women's Africa Cup of Nations. It was Evel Chitundu who scored that goal. And even at the World Cup, she played a crucial role at that part. Fast forward to this season, she's been playing with, I think, Zesco United. Zesco United ladies, if the name is right, in the Zambia Women's Premier League. They won the Premier League itself, and then she was even voted the fans' best player of the season for her team. But then she couldn't make the cut into, that is the 24 women's squad for Zambia for this year's Women's AFCON. Absent in this list, which should be expected by everyone, is Noria Suzala, former captain of the Zambia team. So she played a crucial role in qualifying Zambia to their first ever Women's AFCON in 2014 and was there the last edition in 2022 when they won the bronze medal. She was the oldest player in the team. As of then, now she's, I think, 36, 37 years and has to bow and make way for the other young players to go and represent their country, Zambia. Then there is also Agnes Musase, who has been a key part of the Zambia's defense since 2018. She played most of the games at the WAFCON in defense, also played most of the games for Zambia at the World Cup in defense. But recently, she looks like she has lost her position and ultimately didn't even make the squad to represent Zambia at the AFCON for this year. So now let me go to the ones to watch, the players who will light up the team and then the games for Team Zambia. And first of all, I have to start with the captain, Barbara Banda. So she's actually the best player in Africa now, the reigning best player in Africa, and one of the best players in the world, even the reigning BBC best women's footballer in the world. So that's how big she is of a player. So Banda missed out on the 2018 Women's AFCON, also missed out on the 2022 Women's AFCON for unexplained reasons. We don't know why. But then finally, it looks like she will be allowed to play in this year's edition, which will be her first time, her very first time to play at the Women's AFCON, despite getting selection for the two previous ones. She wasn't allowed to play. It looks like this time around, everything has been sorted and then she'll be allowed to play. So I think a first time experience, and we'll really love to see how she comes to the party to light up the tournament, leading her team Zambia. And of course, she'll be a crucial player for Zambia at this year's edition. Then there is Rahel Kondinanji, who is the partner in crime for, that is, Barbara Manda. At a point, she was the most expensive female footballer in the whole world. Yes, in the whole world. So that's how good of a quality she is. Very agile on the ball, skillful, can make runs, can also score incredible goals also. So she will come very key for Team Zambia at this year's edition. Kondinanji played at the 2018 Women's AFCON with Zambia, but at the 2022 edition, she also was not allowed to play alongside Barbara Manda. This year's edition, she has been called, so most likely we'll see her return back to play at the WAFCON for this year. And then at the defense, there's Lushomo Mweba, who is a ball-playing centre-back, is expected to lead the team from defense and bring calmness and composure at the back, and also sort of start the build-up from the attack when they are building up from the back. So Mushomba also has been an integral part of the Zambia team, was with them at the last Women's AFCON, was with them at the World Cup, playing a crucial role in all of them. And she was actually the first ever Zambia footballer to score a goal at the FIFA Women's World Cup. So she's also a threat from set pieces as a centre back. Then in midfield, there is Everine Susan Katongo, who is expected to be the brain and the intelligence of the Zambia team in midfield in terms of playmaking from the middle, building up from the middle, dictating play, dictating the tempo of the game, showing and directing how Zambia attacks all from the middle will have to be from the intelligence of Susan, that is Katongo. And she also has the ability to sort of take some unexpected shots from range, and also so can be a sort of quality in terms of getting goals from midfield also for Team Zambia. Then I have to highlight the young teenage striker Frida Mukoma, who this will be her first major tournament, and she's expected to light up the competition for Zambia and probably announce herself in women's African football, because with club football, she's averaging about a goal every game for her team in China. So she's expected to bring all that experience to Zambia in the women's AFCON. But going into this year's tournaments, the form for Zambia's team has been a bit of a worry. So formerly, the head coach was Bruce Mwape, who qualified Zambia to their first ever Olympics, qualified them to their first ever World Cup, and even won their first ever game for them at the women's AFCON. But then in 2025, after he had had a long spell and they felt he had exhausted his time at the helms of Zambia football as head coach, he had to step aside for a new head coach, that's Nora Hoopla, to be appointed as coach. And the team has sort of struggled to match up to the rhythm and then pick up the play. There seem to be some rough patches in how they play and perform in recent times per the results. So in the last 6 games, Zambia has played in all competitions from friendlies to competitive games. So they've won 2, they've lost 3 games and drawn 1 game, which is quite unheard of for Team Zambia. So it's a bit of a worry with the transition not being smooth from Bruce Mwape, the former coach, to Nora Hoopla, who is now the head coach for Zambia. So with the WAFCON less than 2 weeks away, they really need to smoothen all the rough patches, because Zambia is probably in a group of death. In a group of Zambia is Morocco, who were finalists from the last edition and also the host nation. Then there is Senegal, who were in the quarterfinal of the last edition. Then there is DR Congo, who have maybe one of the best attacks in Africa women's football. So it's a very tough group and they cannot afford to let their guards down in this group. So before we got into now, I predicted Zambia to finish top of the group because they had a good team, played so well on the continent. But with the recent dip in form, I'm not so confident these days anymore, especially in the group of death, as I mentioned earlier on. So my prediction is probably for Zambia to qualify from this group in second place, maybe qualify in second place. But then if they really do not smoothen those rough patches, there is a possibility that Zambia don't even make it out of this group because it is that tough. But you can also let me know in the comments your prediction and your expectations for Team Zambia going into this year's Women's Africa Cup of Nations.